Hey everybody, it's Dan Harris. Thanks for checking out our video series. Today I'm going to be talking about my top 15 deep sleepers to target in the 2021 fantasy football season. Now, what is a deep sleeper? Well, that's in the eye of the beholder. But for me, it's anybody going outside the top 50 in ADP or somebody who ranks outside the top 150 in our expert consensus rankings. So we're going to go a little deeper sometimes than others, but overall, these are my top 15 deep sleepers for the 2021 season. All right, at number 15, let's start here with Dwayne Eskridge. Now, everybody has a different definition of what a deep sleeper is, but there's no doubt that whatever your definition is, Eskridge fits the criteria. We're talking like closing in on 300 in ADP and expert consensus rankings, but he'll probably be higher if you listen to this closer to the season. The Seahawks were not swimming in draft capital, yet used their second round pick on Eskridge, a former cornerback with lightning quick speed who can pretty much beat press coverage with ease. The Seahawks used 11 personnel 66% of the time last year, which means Eskridge should be on the field plenty as the third receiver, and with Russell Wilson throwing him the ball, there should be enough fantasy production to go around. All right, next up, let's talk about Blake Jarwin. Now, Jarwin was everyone's favorite sleeper tight end last year, but an injury derailed his season. He's now being drafted outside the top 200 and only as a borderline tight end 2. But there is absolutely top 12 potential with Jarwin. Think about it this way. Jarwin was replaced by Dalton Schultz, who took over in week 2, played most of the season with the backup quarterback, and finished as the tight end 14. Jarwin is better than Schultz, and with Dak Prescott back as quarterback, there is a ton of potential. Sure, Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, and Ezekiel Elliott will all steal targets. But that was the case last year, when everyone was fawning all over Jarwin. Pairing him with another late round tight end is a great way to add some upside without wasting draft capital. All right, let's go to Philadelphia and talk about wide receiver JALEN REAGOR. Yes, Carson Wentz was terrible last year, but REAGOR played poorly himself. There's no getting around that. But he is not a bad football player, not even close. He's now got a new head coach in Nick Sirianni and a new quarterback in Jalen Hurts. The Eagles drafted Devonta Smith, but he's already battling an injury, leaving REAGOR an opportunity to develop a rapport in camp with Hurts once he passes his conditioning test, of course. He is a perfect late round pick, someone who costs you absolutely nothing but has plenty of upside, and you'll probably know if he's going to pan out almost immediately. Next up, let's talk about Miami running back Salvon Ahmed. Let's get it out of the way. I really like Myles Gaskin this year, and I think he should be a draft day target. But Ahmed was capable when Gaskin was hurt or dealing with COVID-19 protocols, averaging 4.3 yards per carry and scoring 3 touchdowns in 6 games. The Dolphins added Malcolm Brown, but we've seen enough from him to know he's much more of a depth piece than a threat to start. Ahmed has a chance to not only carve out a potentially flex-worthy role even when Gaskin is healthy, but he's likely to be a pretty high-end handcuff on his worst day. In an offense that's likely to improve from last year, Ahmed is an ideal bench candidate in a deeper league. Next up, let's talk about Byron Pringle. Now, Pringle is a player who should be drafted in every deep league full stop. Sammy Watkins is gone, and Mecole Hardman really hasn't shown that he can be that consistent third option in the passing game. Meanwhile, there was a lot of buzz on Pringle and his connection with Patrick Mahomes in OTAs, and Pringle has actually done well when he's been given the chance. He's got 2 career regular season games where he's played in at least 62% of the snaps. In those 2 games, he's caught 10 passes on 14 targets for 155 yards and 2 touchdowns. Pringle is bigger and heavier and pretty comparable in speed to Hardman, believe it or not. If he blows up in the preseason, his ADP is going to skyrocket. At number 10, let's talk about AMON-RA St. Brown. Look, even bad teams produce valuable fantasy pieces, so don't ignore every lion in your fantasy draft. Detroit's wide receiver depth chart is pretty grotesque, with Rashad Perriman, Tyrell Williams, and Quintez Cephas. So why not St. Brown? He's talented, the new regime drafted him, and he's got the skill set to thrive in a slot role where Jared Goff probably wants to live. There are certainly no guarantees, but there is a path for St. Brown to lead all rookie wide receivers in catches if everything, and I mean everything, breaks perfectly. Let's talk about another running back here and discuss Samaje Perine. Now, I do not love handcuffing backs necessarily, but I don't mind it when there seems to be a pretty clear second in line and the upside of a starting role is enormous. That is what we have with Perine and the Bengals. Assuming Joe Burrow's health, which admittedly is a question mark, then this Cincinnati offense should be impressive. The addition of Jamar Chase and an improved offensive line should go a long way. But they're not going to be playoff bound, and we saw how careful the team was last year with Joe Mixon's foot. For all the early talk of Mixon having a huge role, Perine will probably factor in more than you'd expect, and he should have a huge workload if Mixon suffers another injury. At number 8, let's travel to Buffalo and talk about Emmanuel Sanders. Yeah, I'm gonna maintain my seat on the Sanders is a deep sleeper island that I occupied last year, so let's make a case for it. The Bills have a pretty dynamic offense and an excellent quarterback. There are rumors that Cole Beasley may be cut, which would put Sanders into the slot, which is, as you surely know by now, the most valuable place for a wide receiver to be. Even if not, the Bills ran the second most 4 wide receiver sets in the entire league last year, so Sanders is going to see the field. Finally, the Bills went out and signed him. They did not need to do that. They saw something in the veteran that suggests that he can contribute. Add it all up, and there's just no downside to having Sanders on your team, especially considering his minimal cost. Speaking of potential slot receivers, let's go to Arizona and talk about Christian Kirk. With Larry Fitzgerald gone and AJ Green aboard, chances are that Kirk is going to become the primary slot receiver in this offense, unless Rondale Moore just forces his way into that role, which I do not expect as a rookie. Fitzgerald saw 112, 109, and 72 targets over the last 3 seasons in that role, and Kirk should see plenty of work if he wins that job. Look, it's DeAndre Hopkins, Kyler Murray, and then everyone else in Arizona. But Kirk will probably be a weekly option in deeper leagues if he does play as the primary slot receiver. Sticking with wide receivers, let's talk about Elijah Moore. New regime, new quarterback, plenty of buzz. That's kind of what you want when you're looking at potential for success for a rookie wide receiver. Now, Moore's chances for success are lower because Jamison Crowder is still on the Jets, but you don't use an early second-round pick on a player unless you plan to use him. And if you read the reports, the Jets draft room was basically doing cartwheels that Moore fell that far because they had a solid first-round grade on him. He's pretty much more of a strong dynasty play, but there is a path for him to have success in a redraft league. Next up, let's discuss Rashad Penny. The bad news. The Seahawks re-signed Chris Carson. They declined Penny's 5th-year option. Penny cannot stay healthy. Those are all good points, but a counterpoint, if you will. The Seahawks have shown every indication that they want Penny to be involved every time he is healthy. Penny was on the verge of either overtaking Carson entirely or at least carving out a flex-worthy role after he put up huge games in weeks 12 and 13 of the 2019 season before an injury ended his season and mostly kept him out last year. If he is healthy, he will likely produce, and he also has the benefit of being a truly elite handcuff. He's an ideal RB4 or RB5 for your fantasy roster. All right, next up, let's talk about Terrace Marshall Jr. Some negatives for Marshall include that the Panthers have 2 other excellent receivers, the best running back in football, and a shaky quarterback situation with Sam Darnold. But he is big, and he is strong, and he's been playing the slot role in camp and looking pretty good according to reports. And don't forget, he's reuniting with Joe Brady, who is familiar with the skill set. Marshall is a boom-bust pick for sure, but when we are talking deep sleepers, we're talking upside, and Marshall has it plenty. All right, let's talk about our lone quarterback on this list, and it's Tua Tagovailoa. Tua was bad last year, there is no way to deny it. But it's really hard to hold it against him given that he was coming off a significant injury, he did not have a normal preseason, and he basically had no pass catchers. He was honest in his assessment that he needs to learn to throw to receivers even when they're not completely wide open like in college, so he'll surely take more chances this year, which is a good thing, considering that the Dolphins added Will Fuller and Jalen Waddle. With his mobility, his pass catchers, and just normal development with another year of growth, there is a chance for TAGOVAILOA to take a major step forward in year 2. Let's head to Baltimore next and talk about RASHAAD Bateman. Now, the Ravens have passed at a lower percentage than any other team in the league the last 2 seasons, and they're about to make it 3 in a row. And even when they do pass, they have Mark Andrews. I mean, they've targeted their wide receivers just 393 times over the last 2 seasons. That is a silly number. But Bateman is really talented, and Marquise Brown has not shown yet that he can turn into a legitimate top wide receiving option for Baltimore. Bateman can, and if he really earns Lamar Jackson's trust this preseason, he can develop into a strong fantasy option. And finally, let's finish in Los Angeles with Chargers running back Larry Rountree. Now, we know Austin Ekeler will be the main back, but we also know that there's room for another one to take a decent chunk of the workload. It could be Justin Jackson, but he's often battled injury. It could be Joshua Kelly, but he did not show a ton last year when given the opportunity. Enter Rountree, who is one of the most productive backs in the SEC over the last 3 seasons and was drafted by the new regime. He's strong and can excel as the goal line back, and again, there will be another back for Los Angeles who is valuable. Rountree has as good a chance as any of them, so snagging him with a really late round pick is a good move. And that's going to do it for my top 15 deep sleepers of the 2021 fantasy football season. Thanks for checking out our video series as always. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel here at youtube.com/FantasyPros so you don't miss any of our videos, and also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook so you don't miss any of the great content we're going to be producing all season long.